So this week in the Sacred Gathering, we're going to be doing two things a little differently. We will continue looking at the book of Ezekiel, which I introed last week in either this video or when we were all together. We're also going to be doing a table discussion, what we used to call table discussion conversations, maybe now since we're in the living room. But we are gonna continue looking at this book of Ezekiel, the early part, the hard part. Though we get to look at Ezekiel 11, which is one of the more hopeful chapters. It kind of stands out in the midst of a lot of doom and gloom. Again, the reminder early in Ezekiel is God is needing to wean his people off this kind of false hope that they're going to go back home, that they're going to go back to the way things used to be. They're not. God is starting kind of a radically new phase in their lives because they just simply were not faithful to their end of the bargain up until this point. And so God is starting over with this kind of new remnant, and how they are supposed to live, how they're supposed to see themselves as God's people is going to be a major factor for the early parts of Ezekiel. So as I usually do on the weeks when we do these table discussions, I'll read the quotes, I'll give you a few of my own thoughts, but of course the good stuff is going to be what everyone there comes up with in actual discussion. So I'm going to start looking at Ezekiel chapter 11, verses 14 through 25, in which we read, "The Lord's word came to me, human one, when the people living in Jerusalem said, 'They've gone far from the Lord, and we've been given the land as an inheritance.' They were talking about your family, your nearest relatives, and the whole house of Israel, all of it. Therefore, the Lord God proclaims, even though I made them go far away among the nations and caused them to scatter throughout the earth, I provided some sanctuary for them in the countries to which they've gone. Therefore the Lord proclaims, I will gather you from the nations, assemble you from the countries where you were scattered, and I will give you Israel's fertile land. They will enter the land. They will remove from it all its disgusting and detestable things. I will give them a single heart. I will put a new spirit in them. I will remove the stony hearts from their bodies and give them hearts of flesh, so that they may follow my regulations and carefully observe my case laws. They will be my people. I will be their God. As for those whose hearts continue to go after their disgusting and detestable things, I will hold them accountable for their ways. This is what the Lord God says. Then the winged creatures raised their wings, the wheels that were next to them, and the glory of Israel's God was above them. The Lord ascended from the midst of the city, and it stopped at the mountain east to the west. A wind lifted me up and brought me to the exiles in Chaldea, and a vision with a divine wind. And when the vision I had seen left me, I spoke to the exiles about everything the Lord had shown me." So I think an important piece of this story that Ezekiel is being told to communicate here is the people of Israel kind of thought they were special, that they were, again, the chosen people, that God would continue to give them the land. And these people like Ezekiel, who had lost their homeland, who had been scattered to the wind, were among all these different nations, who were just feeling the pressures of living in a culture that didn't respect them or their God, and was sometimes openly hostile to their way of life because of those two things. And so Ezekiel and many of the people with him, it would have been easy to think that, we're out of the story, we're out of the picture. God has obviously forsaken us. Should we just be like everyone else? But God is saying no. In fact, all of you that feel like you're out of the story, that you've been given up on, you're the ones I'm going to use to kind of rebuild. You're the ones that are going to be kind of the remnant. And a lot of the dark, hard things early in Ezekiel is Ezekiel again and again saying and pointing out who these people who are left behind are becoming and are rapidly going to be exposed as by circumstances. As circumstances get harder and harder, they're going to show themselves to just be in love with and worshiping these ugly, disgusting things, as it says. And we're going to see them resort to an incredible level of viciousness that even, the other nations around Israel are disgusted at how far these people fall, whether it's into just the political machinations and assassinations and the pointless killing, down to starving and resorting to cannibalism. It gets really nasty. And so Ezekiel here gets the message of hope of these people who are scattered are actually in a healthier place, even though there is a lot of external pressure on them in their lives. And so the other two quotes I wanted us to think about is, what does it look like to be a people of hope nowadays in the midst of a culture that is so often despairing, who thinks that there is no purpose, that has no meaning, and to be, spiritually minded folks who are following Jesus in a culture that does not often agree with our assumptions and does not often show much interest in the way we think we are meant to be in the world. So the first of these quotes comes from the writer Jacques Ellul from his book, Presence in the Modern World. Christians must not act like just anyone. They have a role in the world that no one else can fill. They are not called on to select the human activities they consider good and then participate in them. They're not called on to bless any natural enterprise or support any human decision. They are charged with a mission that is unknown to people in their natural condition. This mission is what ultimately is decisive for all of human action. From this mission, all truth or error of their actions derives. So just the reminder here, I think, that he's putting in kind of modern terms is the exact same one that Ezekiel has, and that is God has a very special role for his chosen people. Again, the original call was to be priests, to represent his presence on the earth, and that calling has not changed in any way, shape, or form. And if the way we spend our time, the way we spend our energy, the things we do and invest in does not reflect an understanding of who God sees us as and what he desires us to be in the world, we are going to look just like anyone else. We're going to think just like anyone else. And at the end of the day, the world needs hope too badly for us to kind of resort to being just like everybody else, because we are empowered by God and we represent him. Kind of another aspect of this I found from Mako Fujimura in a book called Art and Faith. Our ability to dream, to envision the future in which justice reigns, is one of God's great gifts to us. Is one of the great gifts of God to us. And as we are made in the image of God, we are capable of this kind of dreaming. We often fantasize about an escape from reality. This erodes true hope. A godly imagination to dream is a courageous journey into the heart of darkness, into the imprisoned realms of our world that can liberate us from the bondage to decay and into the freedom and glory of the children of God. At the end there, he's quoting Romans 8, verse 21. And so what I was struck by is Ezekiel and his community and us nowadays are called to be people of hope. And so do we understand that God has sent us, God has asked us to show a very different way of being, in which we trust that things will be okay in the end, in which we recognize that the story of human history does have a happy ending, and that kind of final fullness, that final culmination of God making all things right, which he refers to here as justice, right? When all things are made right, is something that should inspire us, and it's something that we need to be working towards right here and now. It's not a killing time till we die, not in the sweet by and by sort of a thing. And so I think to truly be a people of hope, whether we find ourselves like Ezekiel in complete exile in a culture and surrounded by very different ideas that are maybe even openly hostile to us, if we are truly going to be people of hope, we don't get to hide back in doing the things we want to do. We don't get to protect ourselves. We need to bring that sense of hope into the dark places. We need to enter into the lives of people whose needs are beyond ours to meet, because we know that God can meet those needs. God can bring them the wholeness, and we need to be willing to be kind of his hands and feet, to use the old phrase, or to be his tools toward bringing hope. And so no, we can't flinch, even though the world is often very hard. We cannot we cannot make sure that we are protected because we know God will ultimately protect us. And so, yeah, it's difficult at times to be a people of hope, but I think only the people who have been changed and who have experienced God can have that kind of a hope, can dream a dream that God will truly make all things right, that every wrong will be redressed. And he invites us to take that message into the midst of places where despair and darkness reign. So those are my thoughts on this just important, beautiful passage in the midst of some really hard discussions Ezekiel is having. Being a people of hope, I think, is such an incredible privilege and calling that we need to recover so much, being the modern church.